All right, welcome back. Today we are diving deep into something pretty fascinating, the 7-layer metabolic cancer protocol, and specifically its huge 2026 update. Now, this is a framework for targeting a tumor's metabolism from a bunch of different angles, but believe me, this latest revision, it completely changes the game. So, to really get why this multi layered thing is even necessary, we have to back up and start with the big problem it's trying to solve. And it really all comes down to this one simple question: why on earth is cancer so incredibly hard to beat? While, according to the source material, it boils down to one core reason. Cancer isn't just a static target. It's an absolute master of metabolic adaptation. It can switch up how it fuels itself to survive, to thrive, and to dodge the treatments we throw at it. And that flexibility, that adaptability, that's exactly why an approach that works for a little while can end up failing in the long run. And that brings us right to the first big idea here, what the source calls cancer's adaptive defense. See, because cancer has so many tricks up its sleeve, so many survival mechanisms, the argument is that the only way to really fight back is with a strategy that's just as complex and multi-layered as the disease itself. Yeah, think of it like this. A tumor has this entire survival toolkit. It's metabolically flexible, so it can change fuels. It's highly adaptive to drugs. It can literally evade the immune system or even shut it down. And it protects these core cancer stem cells that can just hang around and drive a recurrence later on. So you can see how just one tool from our side probably isn't going to defeat their entire toolkit, right? Okay, so let's get into the really big change for 2026. This is huge. The authors of this framework basically tore it down and rebuilt it from the ground up. So instead of just having 7 parallel strategies, the entire system now rests on one single powerful foundation: getting insulin under control. Now, to really get this, we first have to talk about insulin resistance. You've probably heard the term. It's basically a state where your body's cells they stop listening to insulin properly. They get kind of numb to it. So what does your body do? It panics and pumps out more insulin to compensate. This leads to chronically high levels of both insulin and glucose in your blood. And the key idea here is that this isn't just a prediabetes thing. It's seen as a central metabolic engine for cancer. And this quote from the source material really reframes the whole conversation. Insulin is not just a metabolic hormone, it is a growth signal. So think about that. It's not just about managing your blood sugar. The really powerful insight here is that when you have chronically high insulin, it's like sending a constant direct signal for cells, including cancer cells, to just grow and divide, grow and divide. So how exactly does it do that? Well, the source breaks it down into 4 key mechanisms. First, high insulin flips on major cancer growth pathways. Second, it helps tumors gobble up more glucose. Third, it fuels chronic inflammation, which we know is a friend to cancer. And finally, and this is so important, it suppresses something called apoptosis. That's the natural process of programmed cell death that's supposed to get rid of damaged cells. So the crucial takeaway here is this. The whole 2026 framework argues that if you don't fix the underlying insulin resistance first, pretty much any other metabolic therapy you try is going to be fundamentally weakened. It's like trying to put out a roaring fire while someone is standing right next to you, just pouring gasoline on it. Controlling insulin is now seen as the absolute non-negotiable first step. And this is where the 2026 update gets really specific and, frankly, very interesting. It points to a new tool that's emerged: GLP-1 therapies. These are drugs that help regulate blood sugar and insulin, and they're being highlighted as a key tool for rapidly tackling this foundational problem, for reshaping the body's entire metabolic environment. But, and this is so important to understand, it's all about their very specific strategic role. The source is crystal clear on this. GLP-1s are not a cancer treatment. They're not a standalone solution. Instead, you have to think of them as a strategic tool. They're a metabolic accelerator to help reverse insulin resistance faster. They're a compliance tool to make sticking to diet and fasting a whole lot easier. And they're a bridge to help someone get back to a state of metabolic flexibility. All right, so once you've laid that foundation, once you have insulin under control, how does the protocol build on top of that? Well, this is where the 7 attack layers come into play. You can think of these as a whole therapeutic arsenal, but now they're amplified. They're made way more effective because that primary growth signal has been quieted down. And here they are, just at a high level. Layer 1 is all about metabolic dietary interventions, things like the ketogenic diet or fasting, which basically aim to starve the tumor of its favorite fuel, glucose. Layer 2 gets into repurposed drugs, medications like ivermectin or mebendazole, which are used for other things but show some anti-cancer effects in early research. Layer 3 targets the cell's power plants, the mitochondria, using drugs like metformin. Then you've got layers focusing on knocking down inflammation, going after those really tough cancer stem cells, and supporting the immune system. And finally, layer 7 ties it all together with lifestyle stuff: exercise, sleep, stress management. See how each one is designed to hit a different vulnerability?
But here's the thing, this isn't just a random menu of options you can pick and choose from. Not at all. The source proposes a very structured 3-phase game plan for how you actually implement these layers over time, and it always starts with that new foundation we talked about.
It all kicks off with phase 1, the metabolic reset. This phase is laser-focused for up to 12 weeks on one goal: rapidly reversing insulin resistance. Then you move into phase 2, metabolic pressure. This is where you start to deepen that glucose restriction, maybe with fasting cycles, to really stress the cancer's metabolism. And only then, once that foundation is solid, do you enter phase 3, integrated therapy. This is where those other pharmacological and immune support layers are systematically stacked on top for long-term control. Okay, now before we finish up, we have to do a critical reality check. This is absolutely essential. The source material is incredibly clear about the important disclaimers and the context for this whole conceptual framework. So let's be perfectly 100% clear on these points. This is proposed as an adjunctive strategy. That means it's meant to be used alongside, not instead of, standard care. It is absolutely not a replacement for standard oncology care. It requires strict medical supervision. You can't just do this on your own. And this is a big one. The evidence for a lot of these components is preclinical, so lab studies, animal models, or from case reports. We need large-scale human trials to actually prove if this is safe and if it really works. So if we boil this entire 2026 update down to just one central idea, it's this: fix the foundation first. Get that insulin resistance sorted out, because by doing that, the theory goes, you weaken the cancer's main growth signal, which should make all the other layers of coordinated pressure that you apply later on that much more effective. And that leaves us with one final, and I think pretty provocative, question to chew on. As our understanding of cancer as a metabolic disease continues to grow, is this kind of systems-based approach, one that weaves together diet, lifestyle, and targeted metabolic therapies, is this the next frontier in oncology? The source materials certainly suggest it's a compelling idea, but one that still has a long way to go to get the rigorous scientific validation it needs.